A group of wealthy businessmen lounged around their table, the smell of wine and money thick in the air. They'd just finished dinner when Mara Ellison, a black waitress with calm eyes and quiet grace, approached with the bill. One of them, Grant Lowell, leaned back in his platinum gray suit, smirking. "Tell you what," he said loud enough for the room to hear. "Say my order in Russian and I'll pay you 400,000. The others laughed. They weren't testing her skill. They were testing her dignity. It had started like any other night at Glasslight Tower, the rooftop restaurant where the windows never opened and neither did the people's hearts. Mara had been serving there for 3 years. 3 years of forced smiles, perfect posture, and invisible bruises left by words sharper than knives. Tonight, though, the words cut deeper. "What's wrong?" Grant asked, his voice smooth with cruelty. "Too hard for you, sweetheart? Or don't they teach Russian where you come from?" The investors at his table chuckled uneasily. They weren't laughing at the joke. They were laughing to stay safe. Mara's jaw tightened, but her voice stayed calm. The offer, $400,000, was absurd. It could pay for her father's surgery. It could erase every bill stacked on her kitchen counter. But that wasn't the point. The point was his smile, the one that said, "You'll always be beneath me." For a flicker of a moment, Mara saw another life. Her old one. The university halls. The applause after her lectures. Her name printed under research about how language shapes emotion. But that life had collapsed when the world stopped caring about her work. When her father's stroke turned her savings to dust. When she traded chalk for silver trays. And now, here she stood, face to face with the kind of man who thought power made him intelligent. "I'll take that bet," she said softly. The sound landed like a gunshot. Grant blinked. "You'll what?" "I'll take your order." In Russian, you could have heard a pin drop. Even the city noise below seemed to fade. Grant laughed, a hollow sound that didn't quite reach his eyes. "All right then," he said, glancing at the men beside him. "Let's make this interesting." He motioned to another waiter. "Bring me the chef's encyclopedia. The one with the foreign menus." The waiter hesitated. "Sir, that one's—" "Now," Grant snapped. Mara said nothing. Her face was still, her pulse steady. Inside, something long buried stirred awake, the part of her that used to translate international speeches without a single mistake. When the waiter returned with a thick black menu bound in gold thread, Grant grinned like a magician revealing his trick. 5 dishes, he said. "Describe them in Russian. Full detail, ingredients, culture, everything." He leaned forward. "If you fail, you apologize here. In front of everyone. And if I succeed?" she asked. Grant tilted his head. "Then you walk out with your little fortune." "Double it," Mara said. He froze. "What? 800,000, she said clearly. "If I succeed, you double it. If I fail, I'll work for free for a month." The whole restaurant gasped. Someone whispered, "She's crazy." Grant's smile returned, thinner this time. "Deal." Mara placed her tray down, smoothed her apron, and took the heavy menu in her hands. Her fingers brushed over the Russian titles, the ornate Cyrillic letters she once loved. The language came back like music she'd never forgotten. Grant leaned back in his chair. "Show us what you've got, Professor." Mara looked up, her reflection caught in the mirrored ceiling above. City lights glittered like galaxies around her. "I intend to," she said. And as she drew her first calm breath, ready to speak in a tongue that once carried nations and poetry, every soul in that room knew something unforgettable was about to happen. The hum of the city below pulsed through the floor-to-ceiling glass. Cameras glowed from every corner, tiny red dots catching the scent of scandal. Everyone waited for the girl with the tray to fall. Grant Lowell crossed his legs, wineglass balanced in one hand, grin sharp as glass. "Let's go, Professor," he said. "Impress us." Mara opened the menu. The golden letters gleamed under the chandelier like sparks. She drew a long breath. The paper smelled faintly of ink and sea salt. Then, silence. Her voice rose. low but steady. Добрый вечер, господа. Good evening, gentlemen. The Russian slid from her tongue like river water over stone. Cool, fluid, and controlled. It wasn't the hesitant sound of a beginner. It was the sure rhythm of someone who had lived inside the language. Grant blinked. The laughter around his table faltered. Mara turned a page. Our first dish, she continued in flawless Russian, borscht, a crimson soup made from beets, cabbage, and heart. In my country, we say it tastes like family and memory. It warms the soul when winter tries to break you. The investor in the navy tie murmured, That's perfect pronunciation. Grant forced a chuckle. Cute. Learned that off YouTube? Mara didn't flinch. She shifted the tray to her other hand. The next course, pelmeni. Small dumplings filled with history. Each fold hides a story from Siberia, a lesson in patience and resilience. Her tone carried something magnetic. Even the waiters paused to listen. A woman near the bar whispered, She's not reciting. She's remembering. Grant's smirk began to slip. He tried to laugh again, but it came out stiff. All right, that's two. What else you got, Miss Google Translate? Mara turned another page. The city lights outside flickered red against her face. The third, she said in Russian, beef stroganoff, tender beef simmered in cream and mustard. It was born in a noble's kitchen, meant to show that even power softens under heat. Grant shifted uncomfortably. Enough. But she wasn't done. The fourth, Olivia Salat, she continued, a symbol of celebration. Every new year, Russians make it to remember that joy can exist even after hardship. Her eyes lifted to his. The fifth, Medovic, honey cake, sweet layers built from patience, like language, like dignity. The room erupted, not in laughter this time, but quiet awe. One of the investors clapped slowly. Another followed. Soon the sound grew, steady as rain. Grant's face went pale. Mara spoke over him, calm and clear. You wanted a performance, Mr. Lowell. I gave you a lesson. The applause swelled. Even the pianist joined in, striking soft chords that shimmered under the tension. Grant's jaw clenched. You think you've proved something? I didn't have to, Mara said. The room did it for me. She handed the menu back, her hand steady, her voice still gentle. Your bet was about language, she said. But what you really wanted was control. Grant opened his mouth to respond, but the words never came. One of the investors, the older man with the navy tie, spoke first. Mr. Lowell, I believe she's earned your respect. And your payment. Mara stepped closer, her gaze calm but unyielding. I'm not here for your money, she said softly. I just wanted you to listen. The old man nodded slowly. For the first time tonight, he said, we all did. The room went quiet again, but this time it was not silence of scorn. It was reverence. Grant looked down, trapped between fury and shame. Mara turned away, tray under her arm, the faintest smile curving her lips. And as she walked toward the back of the restaurant, her shoes clicking like punctuation marks, everyone in Glasslight Tower understood. They hadn't just witnessed a waitress speak Russian. They had witnessed a woman reclaim her power. The night didn't end when the clapping stopped. It lingered, thick, electric, impossible to forget. Grant Lowell sat frozen, his hand still around a half-empty glass of Bordeaux. The investors beside him didn't speak. The laughter, the arrogance, the smug certainty. It had all drained from the room like the last light before dawn. Mara didn't look back. She slipped through the service door and into the quiet corridor behind the bar. Her hands shook only then, after it was all over. Her breath came fast, heavy with adrenaline and disbelief. She'd done it. Not for the money, not even for revenge, but for that single golden moment when the world had listened. In the dining hall, silence stretched. One of the investors, tall, calm, with silver hair and a watch that probably cost more than her yearly rent, was the first to speak. "Mr. Lowell," he said carefully. "That was unpleasant." Grant looked up, jaw tight. "You saw that, didn't you?" "She planned it." "Probably rehearsed every line." "Planned?" The investor echoed, almost amused. "No, Grant, she performed. You challenged her, and she rose higher than any of us expected." The youngest investor, a woman in a cream blazer, frowned. "You embarrassed her." "You embarrassed all of us." Grant's face darkened. "You're taking her side?" "I'm taking the side of basic decency," she said coldly. "You turned a dinner meeting into a spectacle." Grant slammed his glass down, the stem snapping clean in half. "Fine, you all think I'm the villain. But I built this city. I can tear down anyone who—" "Enough!" The word came from the silver-haired investor. His tone was calm, but it carried weight, like the low rumble of an approaching storm. "Tomorrow," he said, "we'll discuss our partnership. Tonight, we're done." He stood, buttoning his jacket, and nodded toward the others. "Let's go." They rose as one, leaving Grant alone with his broken glass, his reflection fractured across the marble. In the break room, Mara sat on a stool, staring at the tiled floor. Her coworker Jonah slipped in quietly, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Here," he said, handing her one. "You look like you just ran a marathon." She smiled weakly. "Feels like it." Jonah shook his head. "What you did out there? I've worked here 6 years. Never seen anything like it." Mara took a slow sip, the bitter warmth grounding her. "He'll make trouble," she murmured. "People like him don't lose quietly." "Maybe," Jonah said. "But people like you don't stay invisible." Mara looked up. His eyes were kind. That almost broke her more than the humiliation had. By morning, the story was everywhere. A guest had filmed the whole thing, every cruel word, every perfect syllable of Russian, every second of Grant Lowell's downfall. By sunrise, it was on every screen in the city. The waitress who spoke like a queen. Billionaire's bet backfires at Glasslight Tower. In cafes and offices, people replayed the clip, marveling at the calm in her voice, the poise in her eyes. They didn't just see a waitress. They saw dignity standing tall against power. Grant saw it too. On every news site, every feed, every whisper in his own building's elevator. By noon, his assistant couldn't meet his eyes. By evening, the investors had withdrawn their proposal. $200 million. Gone. The press called it the Glasslight lesson. He called it a betrayal. 3 days later, Mara was called into the manager's office. Her stomach twisted. She was ready to be fired. But instead, the manager stood up and smiled nervously. "There's a visitor for you." She turned. It was the silver-haired investor from that night. He bowed slightly, an old-world courtesy that didn't belong in modern boardrooms. "Miss Ellison," he said, "my name is Viktor Andropov. I was deeply moved by your grace under fire." Mara blinked, unsure what to say. "My company," he continued, "handles international ventures across Europe. We need someone who understands language, not just words, but people. You," her voice caught. "Are you offering me?" "A position," he said simply. "Director of Cultural Relations. Salary negotiable. Office with windows that actually open." For the first time in years, Mara laughed. Not politely, not cautiously, just freely. That night, she walked home through the cool wind, the city lights blurring like stars caught in rain. Her phone buzzed with messages she hadn't read. News outlets, interviews, congratulations. But she ignored them all. When she reached her small apartment, her father was waiting in his wheelchair, watching the sunset through their cracked window. She knelt beside him, took his hand, and whispered, "It's over. We made it." He smiled faintly, eyes tired but proud. "You didn't just win, Mara," he said softly. "You reminded them who you are." She pressed her forehead against his hand, tears warming her cheeks. The world outside was still harsh, still loud, still unfair. but tonight it felt just a little more possible. The following months moved like a dream, one stitched from disbelief and determination. Mara Ellison was no longer a waitress at Glasslight Tower. She was now the director of cultural relations for Andropov Global, a title that felt both foreign and familiar, like a song she'd once known by heart. Her new office sat 45 floors above the same skyline she used to admire from the sidewalk. No trays, no uniform, no one snapping fingers for her attention. Just sunlight pouring across polished wood and stacks of language journals she hadn't touched since her university days. Still, every morning she'd pause before her desk, touch its smooth surface, and whisper, "Don't forget where you came from." But the world hadn't forgotten either. The video of the bet at Glasslight Tower didn't fade like most viral moments. It grew. It became a symbol, a story told in classrooms reposted with captions like "Knowledge is power" and "Grace under pressure." People called her the polyglot waitress. Companies sent offers. Universities asked her to speak. Every headline sounded like a fairy tale. A waitress teaches a billionaire humility. A linguist rebuilds her life one word at a time. But fame has its own shadows. Because for every cheer there was a whisper. For every hand extended in admiration, another reached to use her name for attention. Mara smiled through it all. Because she knew. Attention fades, but integrity lasts. Meanwhile, Grant Lowell's empire crumbled piece by piece. His investors pulled out. His company's stock sank. Rumors spread like wildfire. Arrogant, reckless, toxic leadership. He tried interviews, apologies, even charity events, but the stain wouldn't wash off. Once his face had been a symbol of confidence. Now it was a cautionary tale. In private, he blamed everyone. His PR team, the investors, the media. But deep down, in the quiet hours between midnight and regret, he saw the truth. He'd done it to himself. One evening, months later, fate placed them under the same sky again. It was an international conference at the Metropolitan Hall, an event for global communication leaders. Andropov Global had a major presentation. Mara was scheduled to open the night. The room shimmered with chandeliers and quiet prestige. Guests wore names like titles, ministers, CEOs, ambassadors. And in the crowd, sitting near the back with a smaller name tag than usual, was Grant Lowell. He'd been invited as a courtesy. No one remembered why. When Mara stepped onto the stage, he felt the air shift. Her posture was poised, her presence magnetic. The same calm that had silenced Glasslight Tower now filled a hall of diplomats. "Language," she began, "isn't just words. It's power. But not the kind that controls. It's the kind that connects." Her voice was soft, but it carried to every corner. "We build walls with fear and bridges with understanding. And sometimes, when arrogance tries to silence knowledge, knowledge doesn't fight back. It simply speaks." The audience was silent, enthralled. Grant sat frozen. He could still hear her Russian from that night echoing through the years. He remembered the laughter, the bet, the way her eyes never trembled, and now, this, a standing ovation. Not for revenge, for truth. After the conference, Mara stepped down from the stage, shaking hands, smiling humbly. Then she saw him. Grant stood by the exit, half hidden behind a column, older somehow. His confidence dulled, his eyes smaller. "Mara," he said quietly. "Miss Ellison," she paused. "Mr. Lowell, I wanted to," he swallowed hard, "apologize. For that night, for everything." Mara studied him for a long moment. Gone was the man of marble ego and glass confidence. What stood before her was human. Flawed, tired, and humbled. "I believe you," she said softly, "but don't apologize to me. Apologize to yourself. You lost more than money that night." Grant nodded slowly. "I know. I lost who I thought I was." Her expression softened. "Then maybe you can start finding who you really are." He gave a small, broken laugh. "How do you do it? Still be kind to someone like me?" "Because," she said gently, "cruelty never fixes cruelty. Only light can." They stood in silence for a moment. Outside, snow had begun to fall. A quiet, forgiving kind of snow. Grant extended his hand. Mara hesitated, then shook it. No cameras. No applause. No humiliation. Just two people standing in the aftermath of what pride and pain had built, and what grace had undone. As she walked away, Grant watched her disappear into the light of the lobby, realizing the most valuable thing he'd ever lost wasn't his fortune. It was his ignorance. That night, back at her apartment, Mara sat by the window, the city humming far below. Her father slept peacefully in the next room. On her desk sat a small silver plaque, her new title engraved beneath her name. She smiled at it, then whispered to the empty air. Every word matters. Every choice echoes. And for the first time in a long, long while, Mara Ellison felt not just proud, but free. Morning sunlight spilled across the glass walls of Mara's office. The city stretched below her. Restless, endless, alive. 3 years ago, she'd watched this same skyline from the bus stop on 8th Avenue, wondering how her life had unraveled so fast. Now, she stood above it, not because of luck, but because she'd refused to stay silent when silence was easiest. She poured herself a cup of coffee, the scent rich and grounding, and looked at the photo pinned beside her desk. It was her and her father, smiling outside their new apartment. The caption she'd scribbled underneath read, "For every time they underestimated us." That week, Andropov Global was launching a mentorship initiative, a program to help immigrants and underrepresented graduates find careers in language, diplomacy, and translation. Mara had written the proposal herself. She named it the Bridge Project. At the opening ceremony, the small auditorium buzzed with quiet excitement. Rows of students filled the seats, faces from every background, every dream. Some wore nervous smiles. Others leaned forward like they already belonged. Mara stood at the podium, her palms pressed against the smooth wood. Her heart thudded softly. Not from fear, but gratitude. 3 years ago, she began, I served drinks to people who never bothered to learn my name. One of them tried to make me small in front of the world. But that night taught me something I'll never forget. Dignity doesn't need permission to exist. A hush settled over the room. She looked out at the young faces watching her, the same hunger she once carried in her eyes. Your voice, she said, is your power. Someone will always try to tell you you're too quiet, too strange, too different. But language, your language, is proof that you belong. So speak, even when they tell you not to. Applause rose like a wave, warm and real. And in that sound, Mara heard something deeper than praise. She heard a possibility. After the ceremony, a young woman approached her, clutching a worn notebook. "Miss Ellison," she said shyly, "I wanted to say thank you. I used to think my accent made me sound stupid. Now I'm studying to be an interpreter." Mara smiled. "Don't hide your accent. It's not a mistake. It's a map. It shows where you've been." The girl's eyes shimmered. "I'll remember that." As she walked away, Mara felt tears sting her own, because she remembered being that girl once, trying to sound like someone else just to be accepted. Outside, winter had begun to thaw. The air smelled of new beginnings, wet pavement, fresh wind, promise. Mara walked toward the plaza where banners for the Bridge Project fluttered in the cold sunlight. Reporters approached her for a statement, but she waved them off with a smile. She didn't need to say anything more. Her story had already spoken for itself. Still, one reporter called out, "Miss Ellison, if you could say one thing to the man who started it all, what would it be?" Mara paused mid-step, thinking. The city hummed around her. Then she turned slightly, her expression calm, voice steady. "I'd thank him," she said. "He gave me a stage. I just chose a better story." That evening, as the sun sank low behind the skyline, Mara visited her father at the clinic. He was stronger now, his speech returning slowly after months of therapy. They sat by the window, watching the orange light melt into violet over the rooftops. He pointed toward the horizon. "You see that?" he said softly. "Looks like it's glowing." "It is," Mara whispered. "That's what hope looks like when you don't give up." He squeezed her hand. "You didn't just win, Mara. You changed what winning means." She smiled, her heart full. "Maybe, but I think I just learned how to keep standing." Later, back home, she opened her old shoebox, the one filled with faded papers and letters from her university days. On top was the diploma she'd once hidden away out of shame. Now, she framed it and hung it on her wall, beside a simple quote she'd written on a slip of paper. "Intelligence doesn't need permission. Kindness doesn't need applause." She turned off the lights, letting the city's glow spill softly across her room. In that gentle shimmer, Mara Ellison's story no longer belonged to one night or one moment. It belonged to every person who'd ever been underestimated and still chosen to rise. Because in the end, greatness isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving to yourself that you were right to believe. And somewhere out there, in a small apartment on the edge of the city, a young student repeated her words to the mirror. "Your voice is your power." The story had come full circle, and its echo would last far longer than applause. She turned humiliation into heritage, and silence into something that could speak for everyone.